racism, health disparities, but also, exploiting and dominating other sentient beings similar to the way that Black women were. We have these conversations, and I don't know how to say it, but it's different when you're talking amongst each other as Black women and talking about that and those emotions and acknowledging that that is a challenge to kind of, get that message to your own African American community without dismissing that human suffering, but also acknowledging that a lot of the responses, at least I have had, show that people of African descent who do eat animals, that they get upset, like how dare you compare my suffering to an animal. So we're still trying to work through that and in a way that is not colonialist and in a way that kind of recognizes that racial suffering is real. I think that's the problem for white-dominated animal rights, is that suffering, human suffering of that is not really recognized as pertinent when they start putting together these strategies for doing outreach.
I wonder if you even think if it's necessary. I guess I asked that because I was a pastor of a church in Compton for 2 years, and over the course of the 2 years, most of the congregation became vegetarian because of my own particular activism, and a few of the women became vegan. But then I never used that language, although I discussed it when we talked about animal rights. It wasn't necessary as much as I used the language of embracing a sense of a full humanity and what that would look like in terms of viewing others as equals. And even animals in that same kind of vein. I don't know. It was, so like you, I don't have a particular answer. Didn't have an answer, but I felt it more efficient to talk about animals in such a way that I felt that they were being elevated as opposed to my own community being put down.
So, yeah, I think you have to start where people are, like your community, their needs. So naturally, you're probably going to enter the conversation that way. And I've done similarly, where I'll start just talking about my reproductive health illnesses and how I started with Afrocentric veganism, kind of starting with that and that language, and then eventually kind of bringing in the animal aspect as well. And I also think not judging and not being so fundamentalist helps. It's just a different language. I don't know how to explain it, but it has helped. I have a lot of positive responses from people of African descent who honestly tell me, I wasn't comfortable with the language or the rhetoric that I was exposed to in the mainstream white vegan movement on why I should be vegan. It seemed very judgmental. They dismissed my, racialized experiences. So, we're still working on the language, but it does work when you start with that community. You already know that language. In the back with the blue shirt and the red.
Yeah, I guess I'm really appreciative that you are raising these questions that don't have answers. I think it's really important to raise them and sit with the ambiguity. And one of them that I've been reading your anthology, and someone named I think Maat Sincere talks about soul food and the sort of African American diet, or what's commonly considered the legacy of African American food is actually I think she says we've taken on the diet of the masses that doesn't actually reflect our own heritage. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because it's one of those really sticky questions that comes up in the food justice movement.
Okay, so are you asking about the validity of that soul food is not authentically Black, and that it's something that was pushed onto Black people during colonialism and stuff like that? Or I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to understand I've run into the stickiness of talking about health, and then running into these well, what about cultural sensitivity? And I think that's a really important thing to face about.
Yeah, I think even within the Black community of health activists, there is no one way of thinking about soul food. There's all of these different controversial opinions. So I know in the Afrocentric holistic health community, there's this notion that the soul food that is eaten now in America is like the white slave master's influence, and that before colonialism, black people ate basically a plant-based diet. So there's that group that really thinks that way, and that true soul food is not what it is right now. I don't know if have you seen the movie Soul Food Junkies, Byron Hurt? I totally recommend that movie. And what I like about that movie is that it's not like, wrong or right. He actually investigates the complexities of this, soul food. And also, this notion, at least that I've seen, that soul food itself has been pathologized. And black people have been pathologized in America anyway. And I think you have to be delicate with not pathologizing black soul food. And also pathologizing the black body. And a lot of black people don't look a certain way in terms of a healthy benchmark. Like a healthy benchmark is white, thin, able-bodied. Like that's the poster child for a healthy person. And I see a lot of people talking about how, you're attacking soul food as being this horrible thing, but you're also attacking, what it does to our bodies, as if, there is no pride in that, as if there's no history of, soul food has this history of, some people say that, we took the worst and made it the best. And not that just like black people like to eat it, but like tons of different people like to eat it, So, and it's a particular culture or cultural experience, culinary experience, that was produced out of like the worst times. So I think it's a difficult subject to talk about, especially if you're not part of that culture and you don't have the language. But like me personally, I like this new fusion of making soul food, but making it what would be considered a little healthier, but keeping the culture and not pathologizing it. And Brian Terry's work, he does that. Like he wrote Vegan Soul Kitchen, and he does a lot of talks just kind of talking about that. Like I'm not here to pathologize or even say that people who eat soul food are ignorant and they don't understand how to eat right. So yeah, I'm trying to answer the question, but I think you have to be careful, and I think one has to be careful to not pathologize a non-white culture's culinary history or experience. And it's delicate, but there's ways to do it without, I think, the judgment and not using colonialist language helps. But watch the movie Soul Food Junkies, and you'll see how complex it is. Thank you. And if you have questions, you can write me. I thought I had the last slide had my email, but it doesn't. So it's like my name, breezeharper@gmail.com. And thank you. Thank you. What?
Does it have the A or just Breeze Harper?
Oh, Breeze Harper, yeah. No A, just Breeze Harper. Breeze Harper @gmail. Or Sister Vegan, like my book, @gmail. Thank you.
My eyes are so dry, like I can't see my tongue. Oh my god.
Sucked all the moisture out.
Yes, well I forget I can't wear contact lenses while flying. And I'm pregnant, so you're always dehydrated, right? So I'm like, that's why I told Missy, I'm like, I can't see the words, I'm so bad. I should just print it out next time. And it's so tight, I couldn't figure out how to make it.
Getting bigger.
Yeah, whatever, I tried.
I just appreciate everything you said.
Thank you.
And I agree. And I look forward to seeing your dissertation, and I can contact you at Gmail.
Yeah, it's all ready, and I can just send it out. I don't know if I'm supposed to, but I'm kind of against the fact that people have to have like online library privileges through university to get access to my dissertation. So I kind of let people know, don't tell ProQuest that I'm giving it out to people.
I won't tell so. And I think it would have been great and maybe I missed it, but to know when you were talking about refining how to give a piece of your dissertation, to hear what the whole breadth of it was. That was the question I was going to ask, is what was the scope of your thesis from which you were taking this? So I would have